we're here. It's 3 o'clock sharp. And before everybody files in, I'll say all of the wonderful things about CASAA. If this is your first time listening on the recording or listening live, we are the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association, and you can find all of our information and resources at CASAA.org, CASAA.org. Opportunities to get engaged with lawmakers. As I mentioned, lots of resources up there, all of the science and commentary. You might want to rebut all of the ridiculous things you hear about vaping and tobacco harm reduction, and so on. We also have merch for sale if you'd like to sport a fancy t-shirt showing your support for tobacco harm reduction, saving people's lives. Check out our shop on our website. It's up there at the top, I believe. You can just click on the, I'm quietly navigating to the website here just to make sure I know where I'm sending people. Under Get Involved, shop our store and pick up a snazzy t-shirt today. So, with the introduction of who we are out of the way, let's get right to it. We have, I'm actually a bit lost. I don't know if we were going to have a special guest today or not, but our special guest is actually one of our board members, Matt Cully. And for those who haven't been following along his Twitter, Matt has become sort of, it seems, the target of the YouTube censorship squad. And has been spending, I don't know how long this has been going on, Matt, but you can fill us in when his Twitter, Matt has become sort of, it seems, the target of the YouTube censorship squad, and has been spending, I don't know how long this has been going on, Matt, but you can fill us in when you get on here. Has been dealing with strikes against his channel for having a lot of vaping reviews up there, and you can fill us in on all the details. But the larger issue here, the larger question is social media unfairly targeting vaping? Is Matt in particular a specific target of YouTube? And what are some of the ways to work around this? Matt, what are you doing and what are you experiencing here? And what do people need to know?
I'm experiencing lots and lots of stress. No, it's been an ongoing thing for the last few months, and it's not, it's not out of the ordinary for YouTube to kind of go after some of the vaping channels here and there. There's been a lot of times where there were vaping channels that were non-compliant with their regulations or their community guidelines, sorry. And but the problem is YouTube also tends to constantly move the goalposts of their guidelines. So they'll change one rule, and then you fix that, and then they'll add something else on. So the big thing with YouTube right now is that they have not outright banned vaping content. You're allowed to, it would cause all kinds of problems if they did, I'm sure. I mean, there's random vloggers that take a vape here and there, like, where are you going to draw the line at? But they've really cracked down hard on links and directing any companies to websites. And so, about in 2018 is when they originally banned providing links to sites that sell regulated goods. And I thought that was fair enough. They don't want to be liable if maybe some minor was to use a link that you had in your description to go buy an adult product or whatever. And it's the same type of rules that they have for alcohol, and they have this, and for guns and other, adult products. But then, and so everyone in the vaping world on YouTube took all their links off at that time. But now they've even fine-tuned their algorithm to look for vape site URLs in the image of your video. So something that I've been getting hit on a lot is having showing the viewers a package and unboxing it, and there happens to be a vape site URL on the package, whether it be whatever, vaporesso.com or whatever. And some of these videos are 8 years old, and they're hitting me on that. And they've definitely seemed to be coming at me a bit harder than some of the other YouTubers, although have heard stories about some of the smaller channels getting hit really hard as well. So I don't want to discount that. But it's been a mess. I've had to delete probably, I don't know, 80% of my videos, 90% of my videos. I think at most I had like 1,400 videos on YouTube, and now I'm down to like 250. So, and on the top of that, the ones that I've kept on YouTube, I've had to um, edit them, and you have to use YouTube's clunky editor to do that and take out any kind of packaging that's shown. But I mean, I could ramble on this a lot, more, but I guess which part of it do you want to talk about first?
Well, I guess there's some background here, and you noted this about it's kind of the smaller channels getting hit, and I know that I think we've sort of talked about Dash Vapes. He's from Canada, getting hit by YouTube. Are there other other higher profile, such as yourself, vaping reviewers that are being seemingly targeted, or is this really sort of just a consequence of YouTube moving the goalposts and catching people off guard?
Well, the problem, they're not consistent. And that's the thing, is I don't know if I'm being necessarily targeted or if I just got unlucky, but I'm definitely getting hit harder than most of the other YouTubers I know. A lot of them did get a strike, and, maybe a few videos age restricted and whatnot. But like when the algorithm came at my channel, it was like they did like 50 videos at one time, which I've never seen before. So it makes me think that either my videos are getting mass reported, mass flagged, but I still am, that happens to a lot of different channels. It doesn't mean that the YouTube is going to take action. There are used to people flagging videos constantly, but that could be one thing. Or it could just be that I'm really, really unlucky, and somehow the algorithm is honed in on my channel. And I mean, I don't know. I'm obviously pretty vocal, and I bash YouTube when they do stuff like this, and I'm pretty vocal on places like Twitter when it comes to advocacy and stuff. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that like ants groups are deciding to go mass flag vaping channels, and maybe I was the first one they found just because I happen to be on Twitter a lot. So there's different scenarios of why this could be, but what's happening to my channel definitely seems different from the norm when YouTube does this, and different from what they've been doing to most of the other channels that I know of.
So yeah, that was actually, I led into my next question about the sort of mass reporting, and yeah, I think it's good to at least highlight the possibility here that I don't know. It would Antis be actually mounting some sort of quiet campaign as a content creator? How would you know? Is there any way that you can tell who or what is, other than YouTube's algorithm flagging your videos?
Yeah, there's no way to know for sure why you're getting hit like that. They don't tell you, hey, somebody complained or anything. And, if it was one single person and that was just going through my whole video list and flagging it, I don't think that it would have this effect. But if there was maybe 50, 100, 200 people all going through my video list and flagging them, then it's a possibility. And I do know that ants have complained about social media in the past. They've called on these platforms to crack down on, our type of content before. So, while I hate to be too conspiratorial, because there's obviously no evidence that that's what happened, it's not out. It's not impossible. It could be a potential possibility.
Yeah, and there is sort of a precedent for this. I think I'm not exactly sure which group is responsible for it, but there's sort of the counter tobacco campaign, and I remember several years ago, they were encouraging their volunteers or members or whatever, however they refer to their folks, to kind of take pictures at C-store counters of e-cigarettes sitting on a shelf next to candy or something, not behind the counter
Yeah.
in a way that they claim is attractive to kids and so on. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that something like that is becoming more advanced, and maybe we just haven't seen the calls to action for stuff like that. But
Yeah.
so yeah, it's go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. What I was just going to say is what really frustrates me is that they have what I can say, at least from my experience, is that they hold vaping channels and anything tobacco related, whether it be because there's some snooze channels out there. There's been channels that have reviewed different types of oral tobaccos and heat not burns and stuff. They definitely hold us to a much higher standard than these other channels because you have lots of different really popular alcohol channels that are also beholden to these exact same guidelines. They're written in as being under those guidelines. But I've seen them where they'll blatantly have cigar sponsorships. Hey, we're sponsored by so and so cigar company. Hit this link and go buy their product. And I'm not like I'm not like I it's not that I want YouTube to crack down on them and ban them too. Like obviously their content doesn't bother me at all. It's just very noticeable that they are picking and choosing what areas to kind of go after. They do seem like they've kind of gone hands off. About 3-4 years ago, they went hard on cannabis, but then now the last few years, they really seem like they've gotten a lot more hands off with cannabis, and that might just be because of society's sentiment towards it as seems to soften every year. But there's a lot of other different types of vice channels and gun channels and alcohol channels and what have you. It's something that should be considered adult content that don't have to jump through these hoops. I mean, it is insane to give a channel a strike on an 8-year-old video because of a URL on the packaging. And YouTube said a few years ago, they used to say, if we drastically change our rules, we'll kind of, we might take down some of your older videos and delete them if they break those, but we won't give you a strike. But now, obviously that policy is out the window because now they're giving people strikes on videos that are almost a decade old. And none of those guidelines were even in existence at the time that I made those videos. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for sharing all of this on Twitter too. I know it might seem like you're being a little too hard on YouTube or whatever, but thanks for at least putting it out there so folks can see what's going on. Before I go to my next question, maybe a good opportunity to let Jim or Danielle pipe up here and see if they've got something to ask or discuss.
So just before this started, I went to YouTube and searched around just for like 10 minutes. And I found all kinds of videos that seem to violate those rules.
Yeah.
I just went looking for Juul videos. So there are still Juul videos up from 2018 that show kids that look like, well, they're definitely under 21. Vaping. There are still Hotbox the Car videos with Juul, stuff like that. And they hold the package right up to the camera and turn it around slowly so you can see the website.
Yeah, and that's the problem is like it's not enforced. Their rules just are not enforced fairly, and it's like they have this bot or algorithm that's just searching around the site and like, I was its prey this time, and it was unlike anything I've ever seen. I've had them attack my channel before,
Yeah.
here and there. They'll age restrict stuff. They'll demonetize other stuff. But it was like my email. I remember right when it started, it was like I was getting an email every like 15 seconds, just one video after another, after another, after another. Some of them were age restricted, and some of them were strikes. And at the time, I didn't even know why this was happening, and they gave me timestamps on a few of the videos, and it was clearly because of their links policy. And in their guidelines, it does say, and this is fairly new verbiage, like probably from the last year. It does say that their links policy will apply to, I'm not reading it verbatim because it's not in front of me, but it says their links policy will also apply to showing the URL on the screen, speaking the URL, even possibly like directing some, if I was to say, yeah, go check out this e-liquid at Vapor DNA, even if I don't say .com on it, that could still get me potentially hit. If I'm anything that could potentially direct viewers to a site that sells these products. So, combing through my videos the last few weeks, trying to find the stuff, you then realize how, like, there's freaking, some people put their website on the bottom of their tanks. There's RDAs with websites on the bottom of them. It's like a mess trying to clean this stuff up for my channel. Because I didn't even realize how many, URLs there were that were just casually shown on the screen. It was, it's not like my intent was ever to skirt around the rules. They didn't even exist at the time anyway. But, even in newer videos that are only a couple years old, I had to do a lot of editing to them because, as I'm unboxing it, I'll say, oh, this is what your packaging is going to look like. And I'll flip the box over, and there's almost always a vape site URL on there. And it almost seems like they just are constantly moving the goalposts in order to try to just clean us out as much as possible, to at least be able to delete as much vaping content as possible, and maybe ban as many of the channels as possible. But maybe I was one of the first ones to get hit. It would not shock me if you all of a sudden hear, Rip Trippers or Grim Green or Mike Vapes, has this happen to them 2 months from now. So I'm hoping everyone else is working diligently to try to clean their channel up too.
So you were talking about the cannabis wave of problems, and what happened there is like what you just described. A few channels just started disappearing. They just took them off.
Yep.
And then it happened to just about all of them. And then about a year later, they just brought them back with no
Yep.
warning.
I know. And it's like, it's cruel to do that when, now to a lot of people, they'll think, oh, it's just a social media account. But when you are someone that makes content regularly and you've spent hundreds and thousands of hours, and you have this overlord called YouTube that just can pull your channel away, and maybe it'll come back. That happened to Indoor Smokers, I think, too, a few years ago, or at least on his cannabis channel. And it's like, there's no rhyme or reason. Then they all of a sudden just put him back on, probably because somebody changed their mind. It's you're fucking with people, real humans, when you're doing this, and there's got to be like a little more accountability and communication.
And they know that they know very well that the content creators, a lot of them have turned that into full-time jobs and depend on it. So the cannabis people started something called WeedTube when that happened.
Yeah.
And it's like a YouTube for weed content. I know that there's been at least one attempt to do that with vaping. I hesitate to mention it now because I'm not sure if it still exists. But have you considered that? I know that it would be very expensive to do because of all the storage you would have to do it with a large number of content creators.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is like, say someone was to create a brand new website right now that was 100% for vape content. Well, first off, they would have a really damn hard time with SEO because I don't know a bunch about SEO, but I know that Google keeps cracking down more and more on vape sites when it comes to SEO. And they just recently changed some policy. And so it would be hard to even get, you'd be able to migrate some people for, tell people on Twitter about it, tell people on Instagram about it, and what have you. But just trying to migrate people to a new site is very, very difficult. And it would be a tough venture for sure. I'm not saying it could never happen, but it's not something that I'm myself am going to undertake.
The way it was described to me is you would have to have servers, that would allow thousands of people to watch the same thing at the same time.
Yep. Yeah,
And
it costs a lot of money to
yeah,
store all that content as well.
store it and be able to dish it out in large.
Not to mention, obviously need some moderation yourself, because what if some dude comes on there and all of a sudden uploads porn or something illegal or whatever? Like you'd also have to like have your own guidelines just to make sure no one's doing something completely crazy, and that the site could obviously be held accountable for. So
Right.
it's a can of worms trying to do that.
Right.
I'm not the guy for it, at least. I'll
It,
definitely
it would
tell you
probably
that.
morph into a crypto site in about 2 months.
Yeah, that's where the money's at. But
Um,
yeah, one thing I did want to mention is what's I'm one strike away from losing my channel. I'm obviously very concerned about it. Um, and but what's really sad about all this to me is that we're deleting a lot of vape history. I'm not the only, there's a lot of other YouTube channels who know what's going on with me. They're also going and doing this, they're having to do the same. They're cleaning up their channels. They're having to delete some stuff. They're having to edit other stuff. But
yeah.
I mean, vaping's only 15 years old, and YouTube's probably one of the best repositories for it when it comes to information and just kind of historical content to look at it through the years. It's it, and now there's just going to be some holes there that you're never really going to get back.
That's where vaping happened. I mean, it was just the forums, which were pretty minor websites in the larger scheme of things, and then there was YouTube,
Yep.
and people who were looking to get, before vape shops happened. A lot of vapors now don't know this, but vape shops didn't really have a large place in the vaping world until about 2013. Before that, people were pretty much buying stuff online, and they were learning about it either in forums like ECF, or there were several others,
Yeah.
or on YouTube. And, that's where you found out about things.
Absolutely. And like when I started making videos, which was 2014, even then it was like the viewers were very reliant on YouTube, and that's why back then you used to tell. It's not like I wasn't getting affiliate links in 2014, but you were still expected to tell people how they could buy that product. Hey, this product, I I see it's sold out on so and on this other site, but I found it on this site. It's
Yeah.
over here. It was like it was not always easy to find the vape gear that you wanted back then, and like you said, um, their vape shops came later, and even when they came, it took a little while for them to build up. And
And
finally, I
even,
think late 2014 is when we got our first one locally.
yeah, I was going to say, even then, there were a lot of places in the country, and there are now, that don't have vape shops.
Yep,
So,
yep.
you
And a
know,
lot of those early vape shops, like they were pretty sad, and they only carried a few products, and a lot of it was dated stuff even. So like the vapors online were that were always wanting to try out the newest and greatest. Like they had to buy that stuff from websites. It was very rare that it was going to be at their local vape shop anytime soon, if ever.
right.
Yeah, I have to. I've done this several times in the past, but it's worth pointing out again that since you've mentioned kind of losing all this history, in 2013, it was I stumbled upon Grim Green reviewing some very basic e-cigarettes, and it was his direction and the expertise that I found on YouTube that ultimately helped me stick with the products and quit smoking. Uh, and um, and yeah, I imagine. I mean, there's some sort of certainly there's the history of it, but there are probably some issues here for researchers looking at the history of how things evolved, and even policymakers, and of course the broader public who has sort of bought this false narrative that it's all tobacco companies. But the timeline was there on YouTube about how the product and the industry evolved. So it's kind of shameful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly how I found vaping too, was and just I didn't even have a YouTube account. I I was Googling stuff and YouTube videos popped up in Google, and yeah, I think it was like Grim Green and Phil Basardo back in 2012 were some of the first videos I watched. And while if you tell a non-vapor right now, like, look, we're erasing history, they'd laugh at you like, vaping history, ha ha ha. But I can guarantee you, 100 years from now, there's going to be future people that are going to want to look back at the start of vaping and watch all this stuff and find it probably fascinating. Just like, imagine if we could look back and watch YouTube videos from 100 years ago. Be awesome. And, seeing the new product being developed over time or whatever. So it's, right today, to a lot of people, it might not seem very important, but I do feel like it's really a bummer that a lot of that stuff's is gone.
So Matt, when you said that, it rang a bell in my head, and I just went and looked up. I wrote an article in 2018 called "Is YouTube Erasing Vaping History?"
Yeah, and I think that was that. You know what? That was when they first started cracking down.
Yeah.
And that was from the external links. That was when they first started the link policy. But at the time, it was a really easy black and white rule. You can't have any links in your description to sites that sell regulated goods. So, I took mine out, and a lot of others did. But the people that were kind of cracked down on back then, they were the folks that weren't, maybe reading the guidelines as much, and still had links. It was YouTube made more sense then. There was, you knew why they were doing what they did, and like, obviously I didn't want to see any vape channels get banned or whatever, but like, you knew exactly, like, I could look at their channel. If they told me, hey, I got a strike on YouTube, I could look at their channel for 10 seconds, and I could say, hey, you probably got you have a link to this in your description. You're also, you have a little clickable link up in your corner to go to the next video, which that also is promoting products and has a link in that. So I could at least explain that to people. But now it's like this algorithm's gotten so mysterious, and it's like, what's it going to go for next? I mean, I never would have guessed that, like, they were going to, the way they were going to hit us was because you had, a vape site URL on the package of the box you're opening up. I mean, it's really gotten nitty gritty now. So, what's the next thing that they could potentially hammer us for? If I even keep my channel.
That seems like they're stretching for things to
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, like, there's plenty of other types of channels that have stuff like that they haven't cracked down on. I mean, and if you think about the rule, even like a vlogger that has nothing to do with vaping could accidentally walk in front of a Juul billboard or something else where there's maybe a URL or a go to something website. Like, they could easily violate the rules too. There could be alcohol with a link, something like that behind them. Like, anything in the image now that would urge someone or make someone want to go check out a website that sells regulated goods could be at risk to get a strike.
Yeah.
So I know that you've talked about the clunky editing tool that YouTube, I guess, requires you to use. I watch a lot. My mental floss at the end of the night is fail videos, and I've noticed in some of these compilations that you'll see entire clips blurred out, or people's faces blurred out. Is that part of the editing tool? And is that something that you're sort of expected to do over these URLs or other images of product or whatever?
That could have just been somebody that was already editing it, maybe before they even uploaded it. They didn't want to have those faces in the screens, but yeah, or in the image. But yeah, after the fact, YouTube has an editor where you can go in and you can either cut sections out or you can blur stuff. but in order to do it, it takes a lot of time, and then they have to reprocess the video, and basically they look over it again, and that takes time. And it will only let me do 6 or 7 at a time. Then I have to wait for them to be processed, and then I can do them over. So if I was to try to let's say I would have kept my whole 1,400 video catalog up on YouTube, and I just went through and tried to cut out every single spot that had a URL in it, and I blurred other things out. I mean, it would take me months. So, and I basically had 2 weeks of my YouTube restriction to fix all this stuff, and the only way to fix it was by deleting a good portion of it. There was just no other way.
That's brutal. I know, Danielle, you unmuted there for a second. Did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to, point something out and sort of expand on, what you guys have already said, which is essentially, this idea of erasing, the history of vaping. I think that our community and this industry in particular is so acutely sensitive to that because of the nature of the industry, right? Which is that it was consumer driven, consumer innovated, consumer created. These weren't, as you were talking about, these aren't massive tobacco companies who've created vaping, like that myth is kind of perpetuated in this space. It was individual people. And, because YouTube is what YouTube is, it's so prolific, right? It's the most popular. That's why it's so difficult to, for anybody to compete with it, because it has such a built-in user base. That is naturally and organically where this history sort of happened. And the danger here is that, because they're a private company and they're able to, on the drop of a hat, change their terms of service and do whatever they want, essentially, they have the power to completely potentially erase the history, the rich and, amazing history of this industry and of this community and where these products came from. And part of that makes me wonder, and I don't know if this would be getting us off topic or opening up a can of worms, but could an argument be made for the fact that, that is such a massive responsibility at this point, the ability for one private company to completely, erase the entire history, 15, 20 years of this incredible product that has been innovated. Does that, warrant a different kind of regulation, right? And there's been this conversation, right, about social media platforms as publishers or regulations, related to them. But this, seems like an opportune moment to mention, like, is there a greater responsibility here? And do they need to be held to higher standards because of the power that they can wield?
Yeah, that's a great point. And well, thank God for ECF, because ECF will at least always be there, hopefully, because there's a lot of history on electronic cigarette forum as well. But we also saw it on Facebook. I mean, where you had so many different Facebook groups have been erased from the good old days of vaping too. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Where this was a really special thing that was user driven, and it doesn't happen all the time. And if you do erase those first few years, it's really easy for future people to just think that vaping was a big tobacco invention. And people like Han Lick, and then all the people on ECF and whoever could just be like a little blip, but really it's just looked at as a new big tobacco product, which is unfortunate. And I've always had a problem with social, not even focusing on the vaping issue, but just in general, when you have obviously some technocrats that that are very powerful, and they're able to have say over such a powerful thing, like content and history. There should be more regulations, and I'm sure there's other things that have kind of been born on the internet, on YouTube and stuff as well, that you would want to safeguard. Not just vaping, but there's probably other things that were kind of birthed on YouTube and are a great history lesson of the progress. So the fact that just some algorithm or some random content moderators in an office in YouTube can just go through and play God on this stuff is definitely worrisome.
Yeah, the problem is that the people who would be writing the writing the legislation that, you know, defines what YouTube can do are the same people who want vaping, you know, burned and thrown in the ocean.
Absolutely, and that's always been the counter argument to something like making social media platforms a utility or something where it has
Right.
more government control is like, do you really trust the government to do a better job, or are they going to pick and choose what they want history to show as well? So there's no easy answers when it comes to social media, and it's a bigger issue, much bigger issue, obviously, than just vaping, as to how it should be regulated and the future of it.
Yeah.
I think they should have an independent like body created that is anthropologists, right? Not politicians, not, historical people, anthropologist people who like weigh in and decide like this could be incredibly important for, human history. And that would be the only, I think potentially unbiased way to do that.
Or you could try to do what the Internet Archive has done with the Wayback Machine and just make a system for permanently archiving everything.
Yeah, and I think they have to also, because social media keeps getting older and older and older, many of these platforms have been around for a decade plus now. I think there also needs to be a conversation around the fact that like society changes, and so there might be some things that are offensive on the internet that were put on there 12 years ago. Maybe somebody said something that wasn't, maybe they used the wrong term for something that is now offensive or whatever. But I think context needs to be taken as to like, what was it like at the time? Because it is history, and there's going to be people hundreds of years from now looking back at this, just like how we have books that were written 100 years ago that might have certain words and verbiage that aren't kosher to use now. We're really easy to, or society understands that, and they understand, hey, it was a certain era, and this is just historical content.
Sure.
But there's none of that on the internet yet, and that's probably going to be another thing, because just think 50 years from now, there's a lot of things that we're saying now even that could be potentially not PC, or we something was wrong. Maybe there's some new historical breakthroughs or whatever, so people are saying things that aren't true anymore. Who knows? But it doesn't mean you just take it all down, because that's part of our history. That was a stepping stone to where we are in present day.
What's amazing is that the people who want to ban things change over time. So the people who wanted to ban Huckleberry Finn 50 years ago because Huckleberry Finn was, freed his slave Jim, are totally different from the people who want to ban it now because it has the N word in it.
Well, yeah, I think there's a few different groups of people that want to
right,
ban things. You definitely,
outright racists and progressive anti-racists can get together and ban a book. So best to have some kind of an archive that is not a non-denominational system for keeping things. Like like Danielle said, some archaeology or some what did you say?
Anthropologist,
yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've gone a little off topic, but it's still you can't help but look at the broader issue of social media in general. And who knows what's going to happen. We all kind of take it, some of the freedoms for granted now, but they could get stricter and stricter. At some point, Twitter could say, that they could come after some of us for making claims that maybe the American Cancer Society says isn't true. So then Twitter says, decides to ban us for spreading misinformation.
Or flag each tweet with a big.
Exactly. Put like a warning on it or something. So like, there's definitely a broader discussion to be had, and it's the YouTube stuff's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I think that this is going to get worse and worse, and you're right about that. And I'll tell you what, the people who hate vaping are not any kind of lovers of free speech. So you're not going to have Matt Myers and his crew defending, saying that they'll defend to the death your right to say what you want about vaping. They would just
Yeah,
have your speech gone.
and that's the problem. Is like it's just it's sorry, I had a brain fart there. I had to leave the room. My the dogs just came in and started barking. What was I gonna say? Oh, I forget. It'll come back to me.
Well, the summary that I got here was, I don't think that we're getting off topic at all. And as you all have pointed out, I think it's no matter what anyone is talking about, we may feel free to express our ideas now, but as soon as, depending on who's in power and depending on what they find morally or politically objectionable, we can very easily become the targets of censorship or platform crackdowns, and
Yeah.
so it is a much larger issue. If it can happen to this, it can happen to pretty much anything.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to say now. I've seen interviews with some people that work at social media companies, even like Jack when he was with Twitter, and like they don't necessarily want this responsibility. Some of them want, maybe some clear government guidelines and stuff because they do feel like they're having to play God. And so, yeah, like let's say you have, American Cancer Society, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, Heart and Lung, all those, and they all say, hey, Twitter, we're going to throw a fit and start bashing you unless you start doing something about these pro vapors on Twitter that are that we think are spreading mistruths. What's Twitter going to do? Like, whose back are they going to get? Like, who has more power? Really, that's who they're going to bow down to. So they're kind of beholden sometimes to the public pressure.
Yeah.
And
So go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say that the trick of the tobacco control people is to make the media believe that their positions are public positions, that there is like a public outcry about this stuff. There's not. It's strictly a synthetic panic, and if they only keep their thing alive by constantly creating news stories about how it's a serious issue. Anyway, I'm getting off track here.
No, they're really good at making themselves seem bigger than they are and making it seem more grassroots than it is, for sure. And
Correct.
so, yeah, I mean, even remember back when people were talking about folks voting on the vaping issue, whether voting, they hate vaping and so they vote for somebody that wants to ban it, or they like vaping so they vote for somebody that's more pro vape or whatever.
Yeah.
Those I think that the people that are going to vote on the vaping issue because they hate vaping are just so small. I mean, even a mom that's concerned about it has other bigger issues that are on the top of mind. So it's just always been laughable to me to think that they have like some type of massive movement and that they should be feared in that way.
It's a handful of people, and in fact, the larger tobacco control movement is a handful of people, and they all serve on each other's boards. So, but they really, that is their whole thing, is to try to make it seem like it's a large grassroots outcry about a big problem. When you look at those election year polls, every newspaper has these every election year. What are the top issues? And if you find the list where they just ask people, what are your top issues? They don't give them a checklist and have them check them off. They're just asking them. And if you find the full list that goes down and has like the top 25 or the top 50 issues, vaping is never on it.
Yeah.
Tobacco is never on it. It's not something people think about.
Yeah. Another thing that's that bugs me about this too is that a company like YouTube has access to all the analytics. They can see even more than I can see, but they can clearly see what kind of underage viewership they is flocking to my account. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean there aren't some teens out there that lie on their account and say they're 25 or whatever. But most of them don't, because there's not really a reason to on YouTube. Most of the content they want to watch is age restricted, anyway. So, but my point is that I very consistently have had 2 to 3% underage viewership, like the whole time I've been on YouTube. Now, 2 to 3% is way, way under the threshold when it comes to adult advertising. Like I worked in print
Right.
media, and I've done quite a few marketing courses and stuff like that. The industry standard is usually 15%. So like if you have like 15% or more of your eyeballs watching that TV commercial or reading your magazine or whatever, are if more than 50% are minors, then you shouldn't have that adult style advertisement or whatever. So to act like a YouTube channel like mine, or like Nick, who I saw showed up, or any of the other main YouTube channels are a problem when it comes to teens. YouTube could easily look in their back end and see that it's a totally made up problem that doesn't exist. They could easily just say that these guys don't have a teen viewership problem. We're not going to try to ban them or whatever.
That's an interesting point about the kind of threshold of viewers underage, viewers, readers, whatever, attendees at a sporting event, and marketing standards. I spent a little bit of time yesterday kind of reviewing marketing standards for cannabis, and I think it was New York. I apologize if I'm misspeaking, but some of the marketing standards that I had seen, and this may have been just for medical cannabis, but 30% was the threshold. So not more than 30% of viewers, readers, attendees at a sporting event can be under the age of 21, I believe, in order for a company to advertise or sponsor an event. But as you mentioned, Matt, I think 15% sounds a lot more consistent with what I remember hearing from people testifying in front of Congress.
Yeah,
and so on. So,
I know 15% is like a for sure thing with like magazines and cigarette ads. Like if you're gonna put because like print, I think cigarettes can still advertise in print. If that, I don't think that's changed, but I know that they have to. The law, I believe, is like the minor viewership has to be under 15% for them to be allowed to advertise in that magazine.
And what seems crazy to me is that, I would imagine that, instead of finding these videos on YouTube, for example, underage, people are more likely to be exposed to adult only products, right? And you could call it marketing, you could call it exposure, whatever it is, through, more normal avenues like shows or movies or things like that. And I'm not here to say that that should be regulated as well. That's not what I'm saying. But it seems sort of ridiculous to imagine, you know what I mean? Like, the new HBO show Euphoria, right? Showing all of these different things. Probably, I would imagine, has more of an effect than Matt's YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems sort of ridiculous when you kind of put this into context, assuming that that is their motivation for, blacklisting, striking, etc.
Right. And I mean, it's how was I going to word this? Yeah, I mean, okay. My daughter, who's 16, knows quite a few kids at school that vape, and none of them are watching. They're not watching reviews on these products. If anything works with them, it's going to be more lifestyle stuff. Maybe somebody they like on TikTok did one TikTok where they did a dance and they took a puff or whatever. Maybe that will influence them a bit, but really, it's just seeing other kids do it at school and having other friends that do it. It's not like anybody wants to watch my boring 40-year-old chubby bald ass, breaking down how this mod and tank works, or how this new pod system operates, and talking about the technicals of it. I don't think most of them really give a shit about that stuff. It's more so the nerds like me that are into gadgets and have been in the vape world for quite some time.
Yeah, I think that the more kid focused social media apps are more likely to be influential that way. But I think you're right that nothing is influential making kids vape except their friends. And it was the same with smoking. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up in the 60s and I started smoking in 1973 or 4 when there were still cigarette ads everywhere. And, it wasn't the cigarette ads that got me to start smoking. It was my friend who had a pack of cigarettes. So,
And when I was growing up, cigarette ads were pretty much non-existent, and I still began smoking. So, obviously these are anecdotal, but I think there's a larger argument here that people have this, notion that, oh, we have to shield the children and protect them from ever seeing anything that they might, that's not how you do this. It's the same with drugs, alcohol, smoking, any of this. Like, pretending that it doesn't exist and trying to shield them from ever seeing it is far less effective, right? It's like the same concept with abstinence only sex education, right? Give
right.
people truthful, helpful, accurate information that keeps them safe, but also exposes them to the realities of the world. And that's where you're going to get, kids making smart decisions, right? Not just trying to erase the existence of it.
Exactly.
If anything, I bet you some, like, my videos deter kids from vaping. I mean, no, it's not like any kid wants to be like me. I'm a dad that wears New Balances. Like,
I
if
agree.
they're
If they
if the
wanted to
first
do a really good anti-vaping ad, they should let me do it.
yeah, me and Jim in a video, and they'll never want to vape. Like, it's definitely not cool. No, but I mean, I was talking to somebody else about this yesterday, and they brought up, how the UK's approach was so much different, and part of the, we've had this conversation before offline, I'm sure, but how, part of the way that the Royal College of Physicians and Public Health England, promoted vaping in kind of a clinical, boring way, made it uncool. And so, yes, there's still minors that vape in the UK, but the numbers show that they weren't, or at least they collect their data differently. They aren't viewed as having the vaping problem that the US had, at least. And so, the difference there is just they made it uncool. Meanwhile, in the US, I mean, kids watch anti-vaping ads where they're going to have worms crawling through their skin and all kinds of things that aren't true. And it's totally like the war on drugs ads that we grew up with, that we all knew were fake and bullshit too. So, I mean, if the goal here in this country is to get minors not to vape, we are definitely doing it completely wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, I first of all, it's not just anecdotal. Everything that you guys were talking about, I think I've been reading something. I don't know if it's the Mortality and Morbidity Weekly, or if it was something from NASEM, whatever it is. The most recent National Youth Tobacco Survey data from 2021 showing that the biggest reason for kids choosing to vape is because a friend does it, and this is something that we've all known from our own experiences, and nowhere actually in sort of the top 5 reasons is flavors, or I saw some bald guy on YouTube promoting the product. It was all my friends were doing it, and the other thing about this was, and then to kind of touch back on something Jim said, I know we're running close to the end of the hour here, but the voters paying attention to smoking or tobacco use as an issue. I don't know that tobacco was really ever a top priority for voters. Maybe back in the 60s and 70s when things blew up and people started to become concerned, or the 90s, and kind of the peak moral panic about it, which we may be seeing a resurgence of that, of course. But for the most part, this is not a white people problem anymore. It's not a straight white, middle class issue anymore. It's to some extent largely unseen because it is people on the low income side of the spectrum. It is people with mental health conditions. It is Black and brown communities. And so it doesn't have that visibility that it used to. It's no longer socially acceptable in straight white people culture. And so it probably is somewhat invisible to a large swath of the country. So anyway, I have to be doing some thinking about that myself. I'm speaking on a panel later in the year, and the forgotten smoker is the topic. So
it's a good argument that vaping isn't an issue. It only became a big issue because it was white middle class people doing it. But in fact, the smoking is not even a particularly a problem in Black and brown communities. They smoke less than white people do. It's just gay people and
Indigenous as well. Indigenous is the top smoking.
You're correct. Indigenous people, LGBT people, and people with mental illness are the groups.
And it's very class related still, for sure.
It totally is. So it's among the groups of people that rich white people want to take care of.
It's also the groups of people that rich white people have most consistently discriminated against throughout history.
Yeah, they want to take care of them at an arm's distance.
Yeah, it's all of this going after the content on YouTube, content on social media, marketing, and so on. I think and as we've noted, 20 years from now, even 10 years from now, researchers and concerned human beings are going to want to look back on this history and figure out where we went so wrong, because all of the actions that we've seen are largely targeted at marketing or reducing access, while all of the underlying issues that actually do motivate people to seek out substance use, including tobacco and nicotine, to alleviate how horrible they feel, even if it is fleeting and temporary. All of the underlying things are not being sufficiently addressed, but people can pat themselves on their back and say, oh, well, we took down a YouTube channel, so we've done some good. Yeah. And I think hopefully in short order, we will come to that conclusion and realize that there are better ways to address the issue than censorship. But for the time being, and to kind of round things out, Matt, I know that you've kind of had to shuffle things around, and you've had to take steps in order to sort of keep your reviews going, and this is an income generator for you, if I'm correct. So when you're posting new content on other social media platforms, do you have more tools at your disposal to make sure that content is age gated? And have you had to take the lessons you've learned from YouTube restrictions and apply them there, or essentially the question is, are you able to successfully put things over on other social media platforms, and do you have more confidence that those things will abide by the rules over there?
I don't have confidence in any social media platform, even the ones that profess to be for free speech. I mean, they could, first off, a lot of people are like, go to Rumble, put your whole catalog of videos on Rumble. Well, first off, there's a really good chance, over 50%, that Rumble won't exist in 2 years. And there's been a lot of fly-by-night video, or whatever you'd call them, social media video companies that have come and gone, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of luck and work to succeed. So even if you think like, hey, I'm going to this free speech platform or whatever, and they're not gonna do anything about my content. One, they might not always be there. Two, I don't necessarily feel like I'm stubborn. I don't think that vaping is extremist content. So I don't necessarily want to put my content on a site that allows people to say the N word or freaking say whatever the hell they want, or spouse some kind of extremist ideology, whether it be left, right, or wherever. Um, just so I have a place to put my videos. I would rather quit before then, to be honest with you. I'm not going to go and make that my new home. So, um, you know, I've put content on Instagram. I put content on TikTok, which a couple of years ago I never would have used TikTok, but now every single 40-year-old I know that I'm friends with is watching TikTok more than YouTube. And what I've noticed about TikTok is that they're out, while they don't have a blatant age gating system, their algorithm's pretty good. Like the first couple days, it was, I started uploading stuff there. It was like they're sending it out to everybody. But then it seems like it does a really good job at like whittling it down and finding out who your audience is. And now they've kind of paired me in with like cannabis content, adult content, alcohol content, tobacco content, and I'm fine with that. Like, you could, if you want to kind of pair me up in those other groups, and that's the type of, you want to feed my content to people that are watching that type of content. I agree with that. But as far as age gating goes on various social media sites, it's pretty weak. And another big problem with age gating is not the age gating itself. It's the fact that it makes your content less discoverable. So like I said in the beginning, where the first time I looked into vaping, I just went on Google and started searching vaping, and YouTube videos started popping up. Well, if those YouTube videos are age restricted, they won't even show up in Google. The only way anyone's ever going to find that video is if they go into YouTube and they look for that content. And it's not like YouTube's algorithm is very, favorable to that content, or to when it comes to vaping, and they're going to just start serving that new viewer a bunch of vaping content that they think that viewer wants to watch either. So, I mean, age gating is not a bad thing, but at the same time, there's other problems to it, and I think that's part of why a lot of platforms don't even do it.
And it speaks to the larger problem too. We've seen this with FDA, right? When we talk about like, oh, they're teen, anti-vaping campaigns. Well, that doesn't just stay with that audience, right? It bleeds into other audiences. So this idea that you can, again, shield children from seeing any of this, well, there isn't a way to do that. What you're doing is you're downplaying and you're hiding the content from everyone. So, the fact of the matter is that Matt's content, he wants it to be seen by as many adults who smoke as humanly possible. But the idea is more eyeballs means more people, switching to a safer alternative. But when you try to hide it from children, you wind up hiding it from adults as well. And so this doesn't work, right? Just when you try to tell only the children that they shouldn't vape, well, adults are going to see that too. There's no way to separate this stuff out.
Yeah, there is one more positive to this though. And you guys will think it's funny, and we could end it on this if you want. But I heard from a very trusted source that there are some very well-known anti-tobacco groups who have had one in particular, who have had their ad campaigns banned from Facebook because they even broke guidelines. So there was an anti-vape campaign that I'm sure costed a lot of money that got banned and restricted, and they were forced to pull the ads down and completely change them. So at least the algorithms aren't just going after the pro vapors; that they're even going after the anti-vapors now. I don't know if maybe they accidentally showed a picture or a video of a kid vaping or something like that. I have no clue.
I didn't want to start a new can of worms here, but I'll just point out briefly that when I watch a vaping video on YouTube, what it suggests that I watch next are things like Jordan Peterson videos and all kinds of right-wing content that I would never watch, but that's what they think I want to see, or that's what they want me to see.
Yeah, that's wild as well. You're not the first person that's told me something similar.
Well, I think that was a good note, except for the right-wing extremist content. But other than that, that was a good note to end on. I would say any other burning questions or things to bring up? Matt, is there anything that we didn't pay enough attention to?
No, I think we covered it all. I would just say, this could be an ongoing issue with multiple YouTubers. So definitely, try to support them, retweet their stuff if it has to do with YouTube, because one thing that I have found in the past is that the more pressure YouTube gets publicly on Twitter and other places, they tend to, take action a little bit faster. So it doesn't always work, but it has worked quite a few times for me and for others I know. So no matter what YouTuber it is, if they're going through some issues or some, what have you, retweet their stuff. And, one thing we didn't cover is the fact that there's also glitches now on YouTube where they're giving you duplicates. They've given me like duplicate strikes for the same videos more than once. But that's just another part of how much they suck. So we'll leave it there.
All right, cool. The end of our Twitter space for today. Join us back here in 2 weeks, somewhere between now and then. We'll figure out who we're going to have on and what we're going to talk about. Also, August is another month off for the CASAA podcast on Saturdays, but we will be back in September. I don't exactly know which weekend, but back in September is the order for the podcast. If you want to catch up on all the podcasts that we've done, you can check us out on SoundCloud. We're also on Spotify. And of course, we have a YouTube channel. Make sure to follow all of our social media accounts. You're here on Twitter with us, but we're also on Facebook and Instagram at CASAA Media. And again, check out our website for all the resources, news, opportunities to take action at CASAA.org, CASAA. And while you're there, under the resources tab, check out our merch at our store to represent tobacco harm reduction in style. I think I said all the things. Danielle, you're here. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Did I get all the things?
You got all the things.
Fantastic. And with that, thank you to our panel of board of directors, Matt Cully, Jim McDonald, Danielle Jones, and everybody who showed up to listen. Thank you guys, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks.